it has a sting. Ah, two, it has a wing. This is Fame is a Bee by Emily Dickinson. A very straightforward poem, probably not too difficult to parse and figure out. And essentially, there's not much here to examine. It's so perfect, though. It's so perfect for so many reasons. It is just so true. And it begins it begins in the very Dickensian style of a straightforward, assertive metaphor, right? Blank is blank. Hope is a bird. Hope is the thing with feathers, right? This is the Emily Dickinson style. Fame is a bee. If we just look at some of her poem names here, well, that's not a very good example, but there are some more. We can go just look at some of these poems. Poems. See all poems. There we go. Faith is a fine invention. Crumbling is not an instant's act. It's a metaphor. Fame is a fickle food. Let's try that one. We'll get back to fame as a bee. Fame is a fickle food upon a shifting plate, whose table once a guest, but not the second time is set, whose crumbs the crows inspect, and with ironic caw flap past it to the farmer's corn. Men eat of it and die. Whew. That one's a little bit more complex. But some more of these. Forever is composed of nows. That's not quite a metaphor. Fame is the one that does not stay. Here's another one. It's kind of got that same thing about the wing. Fame is the one that does not stay. Its occupant must die, or out of sight of estimate ascend incessantly, or be that most insolvent thing, a lightning in the germ, electrical the embryo, but we demand the flame. Okay. She was apparently obsessed with fame for a bit, which is kind of ironic because she was never really famous until after her death, and most of her poetry was published. I know she published a few poems during her life, and maybe that was just enough fame to make her go into a headspin. Who knows? Which is funny because, well, not funny, but I mean, strange when we think about fame in today's context as opposed to what it was in the 1860s when she was writing mostly. Completely different thing, right? I don't know what fame would be like back then. It would just be your name in the newspaper, right? I mean, people don't really know who you are as opposed to today. But what she had to say about fame is still extremely relevant. Still, that's why this poetry is lasting, because it gets at the heart of what it is to be these things. Publication is the auction. Again, just these straightforward, assertive metaphors. This was definitely one of her stylistic ideas, or ways of doing things in poetry. Success is counted sweetest. There is no frigate like a book. It's kind of a simile involved there. Okay. But fame is a bee. It has a song, it has a sting. Ah, too, it has a wing. This one is just the perfect poem for teaching, I think. It's excellent for teaching metaphor, making comparisons, what poetry does to students. Because basically you would start by a lesson by saying, write down what it means to be famous. Make a Venn diagram. Those two circles that interconnect. On one side, write all the positive things about being famous, and then on the other side, all the negative things, and maybe some things that overlap. I want you to write that down, students, blah, 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 blah. And they would all do that, and then you could have them get together in a group and discuss, and then, present their stuff. And then you would talk about what it means to Usually we just talk about two objects that are similar and different. You talk about making comparisons, similar, different, and all that. Similarities, differences. Before you would explain what metaphor is. And then you explain that a metaphor is basically a comparison between two unlike things. And famous, the abstract idea of being famous, and a bee are definitely very different things. But in poetry especially, and in literature, those metaphors are what make it art. That's what makes it work. And that's what sets one poet apart from an amateur poet, right? A great poet compared to an amateur poet comes down to how clever their metaphors are. That's essentially it. Because even an amateur can become pretty good at style and technique, or even professionals. But if you're going to set, I don't know, if we're talking about, let's say, Tolstoy, Anna Karenina versus Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code, who's better at writing metaphor? Probably Tolstoy. That's what sets him apart. It's not technique, because Dan Brown has technique. Believe me, he does. But you're not getting much out of it. You're not going to have that everlasting... People are going to argue with this, but you're not going to have that everlasting truth that we seek in literature and art. That, of course, apparently doesn't exist anymore if you study postmodernism, but that's by the by. Essentially, that's what Western culture is built on. That seeking truth in art, literature, science, philosophy, that is Western culture. And this is just the most poignant, perfect little metaphor, especially for students. They know what a bee is. They know what fame is. They're going to say Taylor Swift or something like that. You're going to say, what does it mean to be famous? Or who is famous? Taylor Swift. And whoever else. I don't know. And then you would ask them, well, if you were Taylor Swift, how would you feel being famous? The pros and the cons. It's that type of thing. And then you can get them to think about it. And then you can think about this poem line by line. Okay, now we know that Emily Dickinson is comparing being famous to being a bumblebee. Bzzz. So what is the bee's song? Bzzz, bzzz, right? It dances from flower to flower. Happy little garden bee, collecting pollen to make honey. And she is essentially saying fame has a song. It has its wonderful moments. It's delightful at times. It's great to be respected and liked by everybody. But then, fame also has a sting. It's going to hurt sometimes, right? People are going to say mean things, especially in the YouTube comments about you. So, you just have to either take it all in and deal with it, or not. But that doesn't... It could lead to the next line. Fame also has a wing. It can go away real fast, right? You're famous today, forgotten tomorrow. There's lots of actors from the past who were in movies who were the it girl, the it guy for a couple years, and they disappear. Maybe not completely. I mean, I'm thinking of one in particular for some reason, Orlando Bloom. Remember, back in the early 2000s, he had Pirates of the Caribbean, Lord of the Rings, and he even had a lackluster performance. Well, he wasn't... Despite Orlando Bloom, Kingdom of Heaven was an exceptional movie, despite his kind of implausibility of being that person. Now I'm being critical. But my point is, he was extremely famous, and then he kind of just disappeared. I mean, he's popped up here and there, and reappeared in The Hobbit and things like that, but he was the guy. He was what was on the teen magazines at the time, right? He was famous in the early 2000s. And then fame kind of departed for a while. It can come back. It can come back, right? A bee can come back. A A winged creature can go to and fro. So the more you think about it, that line's even better, because it has a wing, which means it can not only fly away, which is probably how we would interpret it, but it could also come back, which I didn't think about until just now, until I started talking about Orlando Bloom. So thank you, Orlando Bloom, if you ever don't watch this. All right, fame is a bee. So this is perfect for teaching, because it just gets at the heart of what a metaphor is, and I think it's conceptually straightforward enough for a student, but it's also just so perfect that it's great for a student. And it's easy to memorize too, so you can assign that to your students. Fame is a bee. It has a song. It has a sting. Ah, too, it has a wing. And then you can make it into like an assignment where they get up and recite it, and they have to perform the best they can in their own Shakespearean actor or actress's voices. Fame is a bee, it has a song, it has a sting. Ah, too, it has a wing. And that's terrible, and I'm not an actor. Bye.